Before coins, before banks, before the language of money itself, there was trust, exchange, and reciprocity. In the vast lands of ancient America, long before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, people were already building systems of value, not with minted gold, but with relationships, and with the quiet rhythm of giving and returning. The world before currency. For tens of thousands of years, indigenous peoples across the Americas lived in networks of exchange that were not driven by profit, but by survival and solidarity. Economies were local, personal, and deeply tied to nature. A hunter traded meat for maize, a potter exchanged jars for woven cloth. But these were not mere transactions, they were acts of community. Anthropologists describe these early systems as gift economies, where value was created not by accumulation, but by generosity. To give was to gain honor, to share was to strengthen the tribe. The economic principle was not competition, but balance. From the Arctic tundra to the Andean highlands, societies understood wealth as something that flowed, not something to hoard. Stage 1. Local barter and reciprocity. At the smallest scale, trade began within kin groups and neighboring villages. People exchanged what they had in surplus for what they lacked. This was the reciprocal economy, a system built on mutual obligation rather than money. Among early farming communities, barter was flexible. A few baskets of corn might be worth a hide or a day's labor. In the Great Plains, buffalo hunters traded meat and furs to river valley farmers in return for corn, beans, and pottery. In the Arctic, Inuit groups exchanged seal oil or ivory for stone tools from inland traders. There was no fixed unit of account. The value depended on need, scarcity, and trust. And crucially, these exchanges reinforced social bonds. Every trade was also a promise to maintain peace and friendship. Gift-giving often served a political role. Chiefs and elders used generosity to display power, giving feasts, food, or ceremonial goods to allies and neighboring groups. The more one gave, the more prestige one earned. Brief pause. In these early communities, trust itself was the currency. Stage 2. Regional trade networks and symbolic value. As populations grew and communities became more specialized, trade expanded beyond local barter. By around 100 BCE to 400 CE, great exchange networks stretched across North America, known today as the Hopewell interaction sphere. From the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, obsidian, copper, mica, and marine shells traveled thousands of miles, passed hand to hand through middlemen and alliances. Archaeologists have found shells from the Atlantic coast buried deep in Ohio mounds, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains discovered near the Mississippi. These weren't random trades, they were the early veins of a continental economy. Certain goods became prized everywhere: copper for its shine, obsidian for its sharpness, mica for its beauty. These materials held both practical and spiritual value. Objects from distant lands carried prestige. Owning them meant connection to the wider world. Over time, these valuable goods took on a special role. They became proto-currencies, objects that could stand for wealth or serve in ritual exchange. But even then, their worth wasn't abstract or numeric. It was cultural. A shell necklace or a copper ornament was valuable because it was meaningful, tied to memory, gift, or ritual. Stage 3. The social function of exchange. In ancient America, economy, politics, and spirituality were one and the same. Trade was not separate from faith. It was faith in practice, faith in balance, in community, in reciprocity. Among the Pacific Northwest tribes, this took shape in ceremonies later known as the potlatch. Grand feasts of giving, where leaders distributed food, blankets, or copper to reaffirm status and unity. But this spirit existed everywhere. In the Andes, people practiced aini, mutual labor exchange. Neighbors helped one another farm, build, and harvest, knowing the favor would someday return. In the eastern woodlands, shell ornaments evolved into wampum, symbols of peace and alliance. In Mesoamerica, cacao beans and woven cloth began serving as tokens of exchange, still rooted in ritual meaning. The unifying principle across all these worlds was reciprocity. Every gift created a bond, and every bond carried a moral duty. Stage 4. proto-markets and long-distance exchange. By the late pre-classic period, around 500 BCE to 200 CE, trade routes reached from the deserts of the southwest to the jungles of Central America. In Mesoamerica, early markets began to appear. Farmers arrived with maize and beans, artisans with pottery and tools, and traveling merchants carried jade, obsidian, and feathers from distant lands. There were no coins, no banks, and no contracts. The entire system rested on reputation and respect. The guarantee of trade was honor, not law. The punishment for deceit was loss of trust. These proto-markets were the forerunners of commerce, but they were still rooted in social ethics, not in capital. Reflection: the meaning of wealth. Before money today, we think of wealth as numbers, balances, accounts, screens. But to the people of ancient America, wealth was human. It lived in generosity, kinship, and community. To give was to lead. To share was to survive. To hoard was to break the harmony of the world. Their barter, gifts, and exchanges remind us that the foundation of every economy, even today, is not metal, not paper, not code. It is trust. Before money, there was meaning. And in that meaning, the first economies of America were born.